let me start by asking you, what do you think, and there's a lot of challenges around engagement, what do you think leaders most misunderstand about employee engagement in your experience?
So engagement is great. The challenge I see is it's not the real issue. So the real issue to me, and I know I come from a biased perspective, all the research we do out of the Institute, everything we think about, back to my grad work almost 20 years ago, I believe a lack of trust is the biggest expense of organizations. I believe everything of value is built on it. So I believe, for instance, it's never at the core a leadership issue. They're not being followed because they're not trusted. It's never at the core a sales issue. Unless it's a commodity, they're not being bought from because they're not trusted. People say, well, we want to push agile now. We had an organization, a president say, we tried to push agile, push agile, push agile. We stopped, we couldn't get it done. For a year, we spent it on trust. Now we're able to do agile. At the core, it's a trust issue, even like NPS, right?
Sure.
It's a great idea. Referral is a great idea. The problem is, it's not a referral issue. Our global research last year said 9 out of 10 people won't refer someone they don't trust. It's always a trust issue. So if I can deal with the problem for a lot of our work in HR, and especially in culture change, is we're not dealing with not always often,
sure.
From our research at least, not dealing with the right issue. So when we deal with the trust issue, we have a chance at solving the engagement issue. As an example, one of the biggest companies in the world we worked with, they said they hadn't had an increase in their engagement score in one group for 14 years, and they had a 400-point increase when they dealt with the trust issue. So that's my perspective, and I know what you mean by engagement, but you don't get engagement unless you increase trust.
And I think there's some pretty deep research in the engagement space, like Great Places to Work Institute, right? Their whole measurement is trust index, right? So talk to me about.
And they changed it to that,
right? Over
I think
time,
is more correct,
right?
Yeah.
And so so if you're inside an organization, I'm an HR leader, I've identified that I have trust issues from a leadership perspective. Where do you start? Like, how do you advise companies to start digging into that?
Well, so what we do is, first of all, we want to shift thinking about trust.
Okay.
And secondly, we want to show them how to build it. Okay. So the first side of my grad work was this case for trust. People were not, there's big names now around trust. People were not talking about trust. They were researching, Enron's happening, and people weren't talking about trust back then.
Right.
So I'm this little, farm kid working on a grad work, that's looking at this. So I want to shift thinking about trust first, then I want to show them how to build it. And these 8 traits that came out of the research, I believe you can solve every organizational leadership issue against these 8. Doesn't mean I know everything. Doesn't mean I hate it when consultants come in and say, "Well, everything's exactly this way." But I do believe we've worked on 6 continents, every continent but Antarctica. We worked with everything from pro sports teams to governments like the president of Kenya and Parliament on trust issues. We work with the biggest companies in the world on these trust issues, solving their biggest challenges against them. But first, I want them to shift thinking about this old word we kind of thought we knew everything about, because I thought I did.
Sure.
I thought it takes a long time to build trust.
Sure.
Well, it can. But in a moment like 9/11, complete strangers trust each other in a second if they're running the same direction. A whole lot of trust is built in a moment.
Right.
We thought, well, transparency is trusted. You'll hear that a lot, even here at this event. And transparency is good, but it's not everything. Right. Because confidentiality is also trusted. I know people that are too transparent, I don't trust them.
Right.
Or, if I extend more trust to my team until I extend too much, that's a problem.
Right.
Or confidence is trusted. Well, that can lead to arrogance. That's not. So we have to define it and come to this common ground about it and the case for trust, so people see the impact. When we get people, then we get buy-in from the organization, from leadership. Also, for HR, a lot of times we have to show the bottom line, the case for trust. And it's easier than you would think, because everything of value is built on trust.
Right.
The other side then is what we want to really get to help them. That's what we really get paid for, and that is, how do you actually become most trusted in your industry? How do you become more trusted? And we've worked with university football teams that went from 3-7 to 7-3 in a year, changing their, that's what they wanted to drive. We've worked with people driving sales issues. We worked with people attrition issues. So I believe you can solve really every organizational leadership problem against trust, but it doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean I think I know it all about trust. But the 8, I call them pillars in the book and in our deeper work, these 8 pillars of trust, these are the 8, and it goes beyond what even I thought. I thought, oh, it's just character, it's just this. These 8, so when you say, where do I start? One way, we do an enterprise trust index, but you could look at the 8 and say, hey, let's pick one. If you don't know where to start, start with clarity.
Sure.
People trust the clear, and they mistrust or distrust the ambiguous.
Yep.
They also mistrust or distrust the overly complex. Right. So there's 8 pillars. They're, by the way, from the research, they're relatively co-equal.
Okay.
But character, commitment, those are harder to start with. Clarity, I can do something and see results in 2 weeks, even in a massive organization. And by the way, people around the world, marketing experts, strategy experts, think they're clear when they're not.
Not, for sure.
So you can
Really
do something
hard.
about that pillar. There's a whole lot more we could say about it. When we actually get clear, it gives us hope that we can actually do something, and that leads to change, or can.
When I think, we're talking about engagement and trust being separate, it's interesting because when I've talked about engagement, a lot of what I talk about comes back to clarity, like being just a foundational part of how that works. So
it's one part.
It's all ties, right?
Right.
So one of the things I'm curious about, you talked about the mindset, and at least you suggested that what we think about trust isn't right or complete. So talk to us, I'm curious, like, what is the definition, or what is that mindset shift that has to happen first?
I just think they have to mind shift, not so much around the definition, although people have had different views around it.
Sure.
But they have to see it differently as far as the impact in an organization.
Got it.
And so when I show the cost, I was just stuck for 2 days in one of the Fortune 10 companies, one of the senior executive teams. They're only over 52,000 of the hundreds of thousands of employees.
Sure.
The overall budget $300 billion, but theirs isn't that much. But I learned quickly, they don't just not trust each other, they don't like each other.
Right.
And I said, of you 9, right here, what do you think a lack of trust is costing this organization? And they finally came with a unified answer in 2 minutes on that one. They said, well, it's at least $500 million. Of course, I said, you're wrong, it's way more.
Right.
And it is, but once they saw the cost, then they were able to start overcoming the barriers and start to use in essence, the pillars. Of course, that's not the word for them in research, traits, but these pillars we talk about.
Sure.
So then we can start to solve against that. But you can quickly look at the pillars and see how you could leverage them here, or issues you might have with them once you understand them. But first, we need to see trust for what it really is, impacting everything.
Got it. So it's foundational. So the mindset issue is start with trust.
The impact with it.
Right.
Well, it's maybe it's start with it, but maybe it's see it in everything. So what we want to do in an organization, when we really want to drive business results on trust, we want them to get a common language.
Okay.
We define trust as a confident belief in a person, product, and organization. But the bigger work is how that costs, how it impacts, and that's I think that's the real uniqueness of what at least maybe I brought from the grad work to the Institute, is these ways we solve against it. So, the research funnels weren't all C's, but they came out as basically C words. So I'll give you an example of thinking around, and we don't have time to go through all 8, but I'll say, people trust the clear. I talked about that, and mistrust the ambiguous. They also people might see those pillars and say, well, what about the engagement issues and engagement? Well, at the core, as I said, I believe trust is the core issue to engagement.
Sure.
People might say communication. Well, we just throw out communication. Communication's the issue.
Right.
Well, undergrad, I was a communication major, but I will argue communication is never the core issue. Clear communication is trusted.
Right.
Unclear isn't.
Right.
High character communication is trusted. Low character isn't.
Sure.
Consistent communication is trusted. Inconsistent isn't.
Right.
Compassionate, where I have intent for you,
right,
it's trusted. When I don't have intent for you in my communication,
right,
it's not trusted.
Right.
So it's when we can see these that we can actually solve for, we can start to solve the challenges.
Got it.
And then, but what we want to do is build a common language around those and gives tools for using those every day. And that's when we can see massive results in organizations. And I'm passionate about this because of the results I've seen there. I'm really passionate about the results because it changed my marriage, my life, my family. It changed me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you. I think great stuff, right, guys? Awesome. Easy, right?
Yeah.
Cake.